go ahead and get started for tonight. So welcome. This is our sixth and final Zoom meeting for ED 751. So there's a couple things that I want to try to get through with you guys tonight. Sorry, I have a new rescue puppy, and he's not a puppy, he's 7.5 years old, and he decides to be very needy sometimes. So this is Milo. Milo's going to be probably teaching class with me here for a minute until I can get my husband to come get him. So the first thing I wanted to do is just kind of touch base with you guys about due dates and things like that. So case study number 2 is actually not due until October the 11th. Now, I went through today and graded all of them that have been submitted so far. Now, for some of you, I put in there a 0 and no submission. Please do not freak out if you see that. It's just that when I have a large number of students in a class like I do for this one, it gets really convoluted trying to go back and figure out which ones have been graded and which ones haven't. So when I put that 0 in there, it just allows me to do a search feature, and I can then instantly pull those up and then grade those as they are submitted. So if you have a 0, don't freak out. It's really for my benefit. It's not late. You're not going to be penalized. None of that. Like I said, it was just the easiest way for me then to get everything graded, because it does begin to snowball here towards the end in terms of grading and getting feedback to you guys. So case study number 2, not due to the 11th. Don't freak out if you have a 0. That's just my way of knowing I still need to grade your submission once it's submitted. The other thing is case study number 3, as well as the final exam, the course officially closes on Saturday, October the 17th. You know, normally we go through a Sunday, but when we're doing final exam week, everything closes on that Saturday. So you only have a week and a half of class left. So anything that you're missing needs to be submitted no later than 11:30 p.m. Central Standard Time on Saturday the 17th. And I'm so specific about the time because Moodle shuts down for its nightly maintenance at 11:30 every single night. So if you're like, oh gosh, it's 11:32 and I can't submit, that's why. Moodle is shut down. So please make sure that you get everything done and turned in because I will be doing massive grading on Sunday and all of that. If for some reason, because I know there's some crazy things, you know, going on, we've got another hurricane approaching Louisiana yet again. And so who only knows? I've learned not to predict too far into the future. So, you know, between a hurricane and who knows what else could happen between now and October 17th, if for some reason you lose electricity, you lose internet, whatever, just text me no later than that Saturday the 17th and let me know if you're not going to be able to get stuff submitted. It's not a huge deal. It's just there's a couple of manipulations I have to do. So I can always award an incomplete, which gives you 6 additional weeks to complete the course. I can do that incomplete and then update your grade within a few days. Like I said, there's a lot of things that can be done. Just please let me know. Like I said, and the best way on that Saturday is going to be to text me because I unfortunately won't be sitting at my computer, you know, all day Saturday, just watching stuff come in. So easiest if you text me. We went over last week, case study number 3 and kind of how to do that, I believe, but I wanted to revisit it for just a few minutes. So if you guys don't mind, I'm going to minimize my Zoom screen and move you guys over here. Hey, that was just weird. Hang on, sorry. I moved something. And let me get to into Moodle again real quick here. Sorry, my system, everything's logging me out right now. Guess I'm gonna leave. Okay, so let me get to, where are we? Case study number 3, and of course, sorry, it's logged me out as usual. So let me just share my screen here in a second, as soon as I get logged back in. Okay, so we're going to go to week number 5, where case study number 3 is actually assigned. And here we go. So let me do the screen sharing now. Let's see. I hope this is the right one. It's kind of hard for me to see. Okay, so hopefully you're looking at my Moodle course. Can you guys give me a thumbs up or something if you are? You're seeing that? Okay, thank you. All right, so as you know, for case study number 3, you're going to have the last bit of this to do, which is the criteria, qualification and criteria worksheet, a project plan, and then a worksheet on process. And hopefully you've already done and finished up case study number 1, and you've loaded that into the overall action plan template. You either have finished or you're working on case study number 2, so you could also have uploaded that. And then your final exam is that you're going to load finally case study number 3 information into the template that was assigned back in week 3, and that's what you're going to submit as your final exam. But let's look real quickly at each one of these worksheets. Like I said, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them because I think you guys have really kind of gotten the hang of this. The results for everybody that has actually submitted were very, very good. So like I said, I really feel strongly you guys have got this down, so I'm not too concerned about going over this. But in case study number 3, we're talking about really opportunity and processing different things. So an opportunity level qualification is you're going to determine whether your stakeholder has a specific need or challenge that you can fulfill for them. And I've given you an example, and like I said, we went over this in great detail last week, so I'm not going to go back through all of that again. So you're going to choose a group that has a need, you're going to identify what their need is, as well as how you can possibly meet that. So I gave you my example that one of my stakeholders was pastors and religious leaders, and I want to help them. They really want to have some sort of an after-school faith-based program for the students. So that's their need. So I'm just going to list that here and what their need is. Okay, so pretty simple. You're going to identify 5 stakeholders. That's it. Okay, so that's worksheet, one of the 3 worksheets. Let me now go to, sorry guys, takes me a second here to navigate all of this. What's wrong? Website. Okay, so let's look now at the project plan, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to try to share with you guys. So let's see. Hang on, let me get the right piece of paper up here first. Okay, there it is. All right. All right, let me pull this one up for you guys. Okay, this is the second part. This is your project plan. So you're going to list your resources, what role those resources are, and how much time you think you're going to spend on it, okay? So for example, one of the things, if I'm going to invite the religious leaders and pastors in my community to come to the school, and I want to do just a little nice luncheon for them, well, one of the things I'm going to need is food, okay? So food, and that's just part of one of the supplies we need, and you know, I'm going to get my administrative assistant to help me, so I'm probably only going to spend like 15 minutes on it, okay? So you're just going to list 3 resources that you would need to use. Now, in reality, if I were really planning an event, there's going to be way more than that, but I'm only asking you to do 3, okay? So then you're also going to think about the metrics and expectations. So you're going to list your 3 resources. We talked about that. Then you're going to list your budget items. So how much you anticipate that costing. You're going to define or describe the 3 resources. And then you're going to define the metrics that's going to help you to determine if these things were actually effective, okay? So here's my example. On this one, I'm going to use the Best Practices Clearinghouse on the United States Department of Education website, and I'm looking to identify best instructional practices that I want my teachers to incorporate into lesson planning and daily teaching. Okay, so that's my resource. You know, I've defined it pretty clearly here. The role would simply be a tool or instructional support or whatever you want to call it. How much time do I think I'm going to spend on that? Probably at least an hour, 1 to 2 hours, because it's a pretty healthy website. And so I want, you know, I want to go through and read multiple things. My budget, I'm going to use my Title I budget to purchase necessary instructional materials. So let's say that we want to do, one of those best strategies is balanced literacy. And if you're familiar with balanced literacy, you have to have, the students are supposed to keep some kind of like a writing journal. So I may purchase, you know, 50 composition notebooks, 50 spirals, whatever. And then how do I define that? So it's going to be, the one that I'm going to use is called the demonstration of learning, which the I do, we do, you do model, as well as a daily essential question. Okay, so there's 3 different things that I'm using from this clearinghouse specifically. How am I going to know if it was successful or not? I'm going to use daily results from the demonstration of learning, which is an exit ticket, to chart and measure student attainment of the daily objectives. Then based on results, I'm going to regroup students according to their mastery levels. Now, for those of you that are not real familiar with campus budgeting, and some of you may be saying, I don't even know what a Title I budget is. Don't get too hung up on that. You can simply say campus budget. That's fine. Or if you're going to have a donation, you can say that, you know, donation from the PTA, donation from the business community, whatever. This is not a budget class, so I don't expect you guys to get into that kind of stuff. Just give me some idea of where you think this might come from, okay? So it's pretty simple. You're going to list, like I said, here's the little assignment piece. You're going to list only 3 resources, okay? And, you know, they can be, like I said, they can be instructional, they can be community-based, really whatever you want it to be, okay? So let me close that one out. Hang on. Get back here to the website, and let's look now at the final one, which is the process worksheet. So let me share this one with you again. Here we go. Okay, so we all know that when you're undertaking new things and you're making changes, whether they be instructional or community or budget or whatever, there has to be professional development that goes along with it. So all you're going to do is you're going to list 5 professional developments that you think need to happen to support your overall action plan, okay? So one way that you might want to think about this is we've talked about, you know, the Bill Daggett model, you know, that successful schools work on rigor, relevance, and relationships. So if I think in those terms, I know one of the professional developments that I would want to have is called Capturing Kids' Hearts. If you don't know what that is, you can just do a Google search. But it's a great way to support teachers in helping to build positive relationships with students. So how am I going to do this? I'm going to use Capturing Kids' Hearts. It's an online course that we're going to deliver using Moodle. My sessions are going to start on October the 1st and end on October 31st. It's going to be available to the participants anytime, 24/7. The cost of the program is $75 and per person, and I'm only going to have 20 participants. So my total cost is $1,500. Okay. Now, if you're not familiar with some different professional development, maybe programs or workshops or whatever, this can be something that is totally teacher driven too. So, you know, probably one of the best professional developments that I know we used when I was a principal was that we used our team level meetings and we did curriculum development, or we might do lesson planning, or we might do, oh gosh, I don't know, you know, team meetings about student intervention. We had a student support team, they would meet. We had an instructional leadership team. So you can, it doesn't have to be a canned program or one that you go out and purchase. In reality, the best professional development is oftentimes something that's driven and done within the school itself. So, you know, if you want to list that, that's fine. And, you know, it may not even cost you anything. It may just be, this is how we do our business, etc. Or you maybe want to spend, you know, $15 and buy donuts for the group that day. So I don't want you to think that you have to go out and figure out a bunch of programs to use. Just give me some idea of what you feel like is going to help your plan be successful. And how are you going to develop and grow? Not only teachers, it could be a staff development. It could be a student development. It could be, like, for example, when I was a principal, we did, if you're familiar with True Colors, it's kind of like a really short, easy personality sort of assessment. We did that with all of our students, and really it was really cool. It turned out amazing, and really helped all of us to work better together. You know, it could be something that you're going to do. You're going to host people from the IRS who are going to come in and do a workshop to help parents fill out the FAFSA if you're in the high school. Or you're going to have the police department come in and do a seminar for parents on personal safety. I mean, it could be anything, guys. So I just don't want you to get hung up on, like, I don't know of any programs or whatever. Just this is literally, you're making it up, okay? Now, if there's something in your school that you know is awesome that you want to continue, of course, put that down. But there's not a right or wrong answer. It's just, I want to be able to see your train of thought and how this all comes together to support your action plan, okay? Now, if you decide in here that one of the professional developments you're going to do is going to be horseback riding, but you have never mentioned horseback riding in your action plan, I'm going to count off on that because that doesn't make sense. There should be alignment between what you're hoping to do and accomplish in your action plan and how you're going to develop your people, okay? And then the final thing is going to be, hang on, sorry guys, I'm keep going back and forth between screens here. This up. So as you all know, yours is going to look so much prettier than mine, but this is what you will turn in for your final exam. I gave you again, here's your action plan. You're going to drop your information from case study number 2 here and here. Here's where your information from case study number 1 goes, case study number 1, number 2, number 2. And on page 3 is where we start talking about case study number 3. So this is where you're going to put all of those elements in there. And you'll see this looks very much like the worksheets. Now on page 4, it says approval. You do not have, the only thing that I want you to do here is, if you are actually going to implement this, who would you want to have approval or sign off on the plan? So, you know, it might be the superintendent. I doubt it would be a campaign manager, but it could be, you know, so the superintendent, the principal, the teacher of the year, your department chairs, your team leaders, your community member, your PTA, PTO president, whatever. So you don't have to list the ones that are here specifically. Just tell me who you think they are, or what their title would be that you think is important to get them to endorse your plan, I guess. And just tell me what their title is. If you know the name, that's fine. If you don't, that's okay too. And in terms of dates, don't worry about that part. You don't have to fill that out. It's really just giving you the title. That's the most critical piece, because I just want to see your train of thought on who you think should endorse your plan. And if you happen to know the name and position, great, put it in there. If you don't, it's fine. I'm not going to count off. Okay. And then the same thing here on this campaign sign off. You don't have to do any of that. That's just part of the template that I included, so that if you ever do actually want to use this template for something else, you've got the full deal. But there's nothing required here on page 5 from you. Okay. So clear as mud, right? So what questions do you guys have about your final, the case study number 3, case study number 2, etc.? So you guys have done a great job on the first one was awesome. The second one, I was really, really impressed with the results that everybody that has turned them in. They look really strong. So like I said, I think you guys are going to finish just fine. No questions? Woohoo! All right, we're going to keep going then. Okay, I'm going to leave you guys over again so I can pull up tonight's PowerPoint. Let me close out a couple things here first. Sorry, I've got like 46 things on my desktop just today. Okay, so let me get this going and we'll talk about tonight's presentation. Okay, so we have talked a lot, we've done a lot of studying and discussion, and you guys have been so insightful in terms of your discussion forum postings as well as your reflective essays. I'm seeing great work come out of your case studies. But I just wanted to kind of finish tonight. I don't necessarily want to introduce to you new content simply because I think that's a little unfair to do when you have a week and a half left. But I just wanted to sort of go back through the best practices. And, you know, whether you're reading that article from Ron Edmonds from 1978, or if you're looking at what I put together for tonight, it's all pretty much the same. What are those best practices that are going to help our urban schools and our urban communities to be successful? So I changed the language up a little bit. It's probably a little more modern, I guess, from what we talked about last week based on the Ron Edmonds article. At the end of the day, you know, like I said, you know, if you've never had the opportunity to listen to Bill Daggett or attend one of his conferences, I've been to several of his conferences. In fact, I used to try to go almost every year. He's probably one of my favorite researchers in the sense of, I think he really makes the complex simple. And so, you know, he's the one that came up with the 3 R's: rigor, relationships, and relevance. Those are critical to student success. He's also the one that will tell you that if you go through and look at the state standards for every state in this country, there is absolutely no way to teach them all. And in fact, you could throw away more than 50% of them and still have more than you can possibly teach in a year. So he talks a lot about high stakes, objectives, and things like that. So kind of if you think in terms of that big frame of rigor, relevance, and relationships, what does that look like in practice? I know I remember back to my graduate school days, and I always hated when my professors would talk in all this theory. And I'm like, give me a concrete example. What does it look like in action? So that's what I'm trying to do tonight. So if you're thinking in terms of relationships, one of the things that has to happen, and it does happen in our most effective schools, students have to feel valued and capable. So we have to move beyond the idea of these poor little children, I'm here to save them. We have to look at our urban students and see them as not only valuable human beings, but capable of doing on-level, rigorous, engaging work. We can no longer afford to dumb down the curriculum and teach students at a lower level than what they're going to be tested at. And I could talk all day about why, you know, all of the standardized testing should go away, how it doesn't really help us to measure anything, that many times student results are more a better predictor of their poverty level or their cultural differences or whatever. But it's here, guys, and I don't see it necessarily going away anytime soon. Accountability is big business, you know, so let's be honest about that. But we have to treat our students just like we treat any student, whether they're from the most affluent family or the poorest family. So how do we do that? Well, number one, teachers have to know and value our students as individuals. You two stop. Sorry, the big dog's messing with the little dog. Y'all stop. Milo, hush. So what does that look like? So for example, one of the things that you know, I know I always required was that teachers, let's stop, I'm gonna run you out of the room. Sorry, guys, I'm gonna literally get rid of the collie and the little one and make them go outside. Hang on. Come on, Lucy. Go, go. Both of you. Go. Okay, sorry about that. I think they're worse than children. Okay, so anyway, I expected my teachers between passing periods to stand in their doorway. They had to not only stand in their doorway, they had to greet the students. And whether it was a hug or shake their hands, and I know with COVID that's all different, but at least acknowledge the child by name, you know, and it may seem like a small thing. Some of my teachers are like, well, I'm trying to get ready for the next class, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, no, this is so important because it gives you an instant read on what kind of day that child is having. You know, you can see those that are coming in that look upset. There's so many things that you can capture within that 10-second interaction that can really make or break how your class goes. You also have to make sure that teachers and staff members care enough to model courtesy and respect. This is particularly important in many of our urban schools. If students feel like they're being disrespected, they're A, going to tune you out, B, they're going to probably be a discipline problem, C, they're not going to be able to come into the classroom and learn. So we have to be the models of what courtesy and respect looks like. And, you know, thinking about particularly like those kind of middle school age students, 5th, 6th, 7th grade, you know, they can have a little bit of an attitude sometimes. But you have to be the adult. In fact, I used to have a boss who used to say that in any given situation in the school, he always hoped that there was at least one adult involved, and he was happiest when it was the teacher. You have to be the model, and you have to show that respect, even when it's not deserved, even when the student's being incredibly disrespectful. You have to be the calmer, cooler adult in that situation. And there's a lot of ways to de-escalate students, but it's really important that we do that. The second thing, so if we talk in terms of the frame, rigor, relevance, and relationships, let's talk for a minute about rigor. So as I said, one of the things that I've seen happen far too often in some of our lower achieving schools is that we dumb down the curriculum. And so we don't expect students to master difficult content, to understand complex concepts, etc. So we have to make sure, though, that when we're planning that instruction, that it is rigorous. And you do that by focusing on understanding and mastery of the content. Now, how does that happen? Well, first of all, you want to make sure that you have great first instruction. So if you think in terms of that RTI model, what does great first instruction mean? It means that the first time that a specific skill or knowledge or something like that is taught, it's done in such a way that 90% plus of your students are going to master it the first time it's given. Now, for some of our schools who are students who struggle, that may mean you may need to expand the time that you would spend teaching that. So, you know, in a lot of the successful urban schools, they have extended school days. So while everybody else is going to school from 8 to 3, they're going to be there from 8 to 4:30. So you may have to extend the time. You may have to provide more hands-on learning. So instead of just delivering content through auditory and visual means, you may need to bring in a kinesthetic element. But letting the students experience that content till they understand it and master it is critical. The other way that you do that too is that you have to work collaboratively. The old days of teachers going in their rooms, shutting their doors and doing their own thing is over. And if you're still doing that, I feel sorry for you. There's so much content to be covered, and the expectations are so high that it's virtually impossible for one person to do everything that needs to be done to successfully plan and deliver a lesson. So I would make sure that you're planning collaboratively with others who teach your same content or your same grade level or whatever, and that you really do go in and look at the curriculum. So when I get the opportunity to teach the curriculum class or the EDL 710 leading instruction and assessment, this is one of the things we talk about all the time, that if you do not understand what those objectives and goals are for, or the standards I should say, for your particular grade level in your state, and you don't understand how they're written and what each one of those particular standards means, it's really difficult to hit the mark in terms of delivery of instruction. So work together, use each other to plan and to really, like I said, harness that group thinking and all of that. The other thing that we used to do that was really successful is we would look at on our benchmark assessments how each teacher did. And we were pretty transparent. We had what we called a war room, and we posted everybody's results for every assessment, whether it was state, district, campus, whatever, by teacher. We didn't do that to embarrass anybody, but the reason we did it when we broke it down by objective was, it was like, wow, in chemistry, Mr. Asher, his kids really, they did amazingly well on objective 1. Mr. Judah's students did really, really well on objective 3. So we would actually move the students and regroup them, and this was at the high school level, so that when it was time to teach objective number 1, everybody heard it from Mr. Asher. Everybody, when we were ready to teach objective number 3, everybody rotated through with Mr. Judah, because the teachers figured out pretty quickly that they could regroup the students and really capitalize on each other's strengths. And we had tremendously positive results from that. Okay. So again, thinking about rigor, we also have to promote clarity. So a lot of times, and this has even happened to me when I was going to observe a teacher, and if I couldn't tell within the first 1 to 2 minutes what they were trying to teach the students, we had a problem. So it's often, you'll see in classrooms where students don't have any idea what they're expected to learn. So I believe in being very overt. So, you know, I even do this in my college level, like when I teach freshman classes face-to-face. I have a daily objective and I put it on the board. And I expect the students to read it. And then, you know, I'm like, okay, this is what we're doing today. Here's what you should know and be able to do by the end of this lesson. So when we're very clear with what we're expecting students to learn, the chances of them learning it, internalizing it, and maintaining that learning grow exponentially. We also have to make sure we break down complex tasks into a logical progression. So we have to also understand too what our students' background knowledge is and build schema where necessary so that our students can really understand this. So for example, if they have no clue about, I don't know, the Boston Tea Party, and they don't know what that is, unless we do some schema building about how that occurred, why it occurred, what was the purpose of it, that kind of stuff, it's really hard for our students to grasp some difficult and complex concepts. So we have to not only do that logical progression and sequencing, we have to also give them a rationale behind what we're teaching. So thinking again about those relationships, we need to ensure that we are teaching from a cultural, social, and personal way. So for example, we have to incorporate into our lessons those critical elements of a particular objective which the students can actually relate to. So for example, you know, I learned this lesson the hard way. When I was, you know, working in Dallas as a middle school principal, I just assumed because it was less than 5 miles from the school that everybody had been to the Galleria and at least seen an ice skating rink. They hadn't. So we physically took the students there, just like we physically took them to at least 2 college campuses in the state of Texas. because we had to build the background knowledge and information so students could then begin to relate to some of the things that we were teaching. So there are oftentimes gaps in what students know or what they've experienced that we have to build and fill in for them. That may not be true in some of your more affluent schools. We also have to make sure we really get to know our students on a personal level. You know, I've told you guys my stories about 4 children, you know, when I was an elementary principal, and thankfully, you know, it's not that I knew what I was doing. I was a young, new principal. I just got lucky. But knowing each one of those children's stories certainly made a huge impact on me and the way I related to those students. So we have to make sure we take that time. A lot of teachers and even principals will say, you know, we don't have time to do team building. We don't have time to get to know each other. I'm telling you, if you don't do this, you're going to lose a whole lot of valuable instructional time. So if you do this at the beginning, know your students, find ways to connect with them culturally, socially, and personally, they're going to be much, much more ready to learn and to accept the content that's being taught. We also have to make sure that we are checking for understanding, providing feedback, and adapting as teachers. So there's nothing worse than going into a classroom and the teacher is teaching, and the students are clearly not understanding or mastering the content. So the masterful teacher does frequent checks for understanding, and they can be super simple. So for example, just like I do with you guys sometimes, hey, can you see this? Give me a thumbs up. That tells me, okay, yeah, we're okay, we're good to go. If you can't see it, then I know I have to adapt and adjust. The other part of it is too, that we want to make sure we provide ongoing feedback. In fact, I almost laughed, but then I thought, gosh, this is really enough to make me cry. I got an email today from one of the associate deans about there had been some concerns that the professors and instructors were not staying behind the plexiglass divider. So if you've not been on LSUS campus as part of the come back to school COVID stuff, they created, it's like a bubble. They've like taped off the zone the professor can be in at the front of the room, and then they have plexiglass in front of them, so they are physically distanced from the students. And while I get the importance of that, I can't teach that way, because I've got to be looking at what kids are doing in the moment, providing feedback. So I thought, okay, it's sad that they're getting on to it, those of us that, not me, but those of us that are not staying in our bubble to teach. But at the same time, hallelujah, some people are not staying in their bubble, because kids need that constant feedback. If students mislearn a concept or a skill, it takes 23 repetitions of doing it correctly to unlearn what they learned to do wrong. So if you're teaching long division and the student practices it 5 times, doing it incorrectly, you're going to have 23 repetitions for each one of those 5 times the child did it wrong. So you're talking roughly 120, 130 repetitions of them doing it correctly to unlearn that misconcept. So a lot of our students come to school or come into a grade level or a content area with misunderstanding. Make sure that you correct it in the moment as quickly as possible, so we don't have to spend our time reteaching stuff that kids learned incorrectly. We also have to make sure too that we are checking for those higher levels of understanding. So if you think in terms of the good old Bloom's taxonomy, make sure that you are providing for teaching that is at the upper end of Bloom. So kids are able to synthesize and analyze and apply their learning. Just like I've tried to get you guys to do in this course, I don't want you to regurgitate information. I know the information. I want you to analyze it and apply it in a real world situation. And that's what we have to get our kids to do. We also have to make sure we build fluency with vocabulary. So I had one of those aha moments. We were doing instructional rounds at my school, and I kept noticing, because I'd seen in the data that we weren't doing very well in vocabulary. It was a really low area in every single assessment we did, whether it was state or district or one of our own campus. Our kids just weren't doing well in vocabulary. And I couldn't figure out why. I'm like, I know we teach vocabulary, what's going wrong? So as we were doing these instructional rounds, I began to notice that the majority of the teachers were teaching vocabulary by, here's your list of your SAT words. Turn it on the board on Monday. Your homework on Monday night is to go home and define them. Your homework on Tuesday night is to use them in a sentence. And then on Friday, we're going to have a quiz over these words. Well, that is the absolute worst way in the world to teach vocabulary. It's ineffective, a waste of time, and it doesn't stick. So we completely reframed the way that we were teaching vocabulary, and we actually followed Robert Marzano's model. And lo and behold, it worked. We have to make sure that our students understand the vocabulary that's within our lesson. And how do we do that? You have to make new vocabulary seem familiar, not by quizzing and testing and writing sentences and all of that. You do it by building schema and developing those conceptual, I forget what they're called, synapses in the brain that allow students to connect that new vocabulary with what they're learning as well as something familiar. So if you don't know how to teach vocabulary, best book in the world is Building Academic Vocabulary. It's written by Deborah Pickering and Robert Marzano. Super easy model, it's effective, and it works. Okay, we also have to promote, as I said, I'm not going to go any more into this necessarily, but successful practice. So it drives me crazy when a teacher will teach a new concept and we're running out of time in class. And so they're like, okay, for your homework, how many times have you done this? I've done it, I'm guilty. For your homework, I want you to do page 26, do problems 1 through 30. I just taught new content. I have no way of knowing whether or not the students understand it well enough to do it on their own. So I'm now going to send them home to do 30 homework problems that they're probably going to all do wrong. And then I wonder why they're not successful. That's why I'm a firm believer in that model of I do, so I'm going to show you, I'm going to model for you. And you can do that whether you're writing, whether you're in science, whether you're reading, whatever. Then we're going to spend some time doing it together with me supporting you. You may be doing it with a peer or with your table group or however you decide to do it. And that's all going to happen long before I turn you loose to do independent work. And even when I turn you loose to do independent work, I'm going to be constantly monitoring to make sure that you're not doing it incorrectly. Because as I said, 23 repetitions to unlearn the wrong way. We also have to lead our students to love learning. And how do you do that? One thing is, it seems kind of silly, but be enthusiastic as a teacher. I've probably, and I'm not exaggerating, probably observed in my career 10,000 teachers. And there were those classrooms that, I'd be like, oh gosh, I need to go in there, but I can't stand going in there, it's so boring. I feel bad for the kids because I'm bored out of my mind. Versus those teachers that I'm like, I love going in that classroom because there's just an energy about that person and the way that they teach that makes everybody want to be involved in learning. So it's okay for learning to be fun. Use games, use, the clickers, use the Polits, on phones, whatever. There's a million different ways to make learning engaging and fun, but it all starts with our attitude. And if we come in there and we show that we love the kids and we love what we're teaching, it will go a long, long way. So that kind of wraps up those best practices. Again, and as you can see, you'll see throughout this, the rigor, the relevance, and the relationships woven into each one of these best practices. I'm not going to walk you through this tonight, but one of the things that is becoming more and more prevalent, I guess, in schools is using not only action planning like I've had you guys do, but also to do what's called action research. And so this is just a handy dandy little tool. It's called the Action Research Tool, or ART. And so it helps you as you're starting to think about, what do I want to do to solve X, okay? So the first thing you have to do is think about, what's the problem, issue, or concern that I want to address, or what do I want my students to learn? What's the question I want to ask that addresses the problem or the students learning? And what do I already know? What evidence exists? So this is kind of like when you're brainstorming, maybe with your team. We know that we're about to start the unit on photosynthesis in biology. So what is it that I want my students to learn? What's the question that I want to be able to ask them to get them to be excited about photosynthesis? And what do I already know, and what is my evidence? Then you plan. So what are you going to do? How will I obtain more information? And how am I going to collect data? Then your actual action is you're going to try your lesson. You're going to collect data in action using data collection tools. And then finally, you're going to assess and evaluate. So I actually included, it's posted in Moodle for you guys, the template for this. But I like this because oftentimes I would hear from teachers, because I have a zillion different protocols, but I like this one because it's basically pretty simple. Only 4 pages, few questions. But if you follow this when you're planning lessons or an initiative or really an event, I mean, it really could be used for anything. It'll help you to really have solid planning. And, if you've read any of Stephen Covey's work, he talks a lot about spend more time in the planning quadrant than anywhere else, because then your implementation will be seamless. But if you don't spend time in that planning, pre-work part of what you're doing, then you're going to end up with not a very successful implementation. So this is just real simple, 4 little pages, and you can then identify what you need to do. Okay. All right, let me stop sharing this real quick and bring you guys back over here. Okay. The name of the model to introduce vocabulary, it's called Building, I think the name of the book is Building Academic Vocabulary. But if you just do a Google search and just put in vocabulary, and I'll type the names in here. It's Deborah Pickering, and Robert Marzano. If you just put those names in, you'll get, in fact, there's a whole Marzano website and institute, but he is honestly probably the best. I hate to call him a researcher because he does so much practical application, but he's probably the best person that if you need to know how to teach something or you're looking for a best practice, he is always my go-to guy. Marzano's published dozens of books and all that, but like I said, he is the best when it comes to instructional pedagogy, strategy, skills, that kind of stuff. You guys, any questions for me tonight? Emily, did you have a question? Or are you just moving? Okay. Well, guys, if you don't have any questions, I will certainly be communicating with you through feedback and breaks and stuff. But thank you for your time and attention to this class. This is actually the first time I taught ED 751, which is kind of funny since I'm the one who came up with this whole urban education idea at LSUS, but I just hadn't had an opportunity to teach this class yet. Other people have been teaching it, but I've so enjoyed you guys. I always learn. Every time I have a class, I learn so much from the students. And you guys have really prompted a lot of thinking on my part. And you just have been a delight. You guys are awesome. So I wish you well. If you need anything on into the future, please feel free to reach out to me. I do letters of recommendation. I have tons of contacts in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, so if you're looking for employment there, I can help you with that. But more importantly, like I said, you guys are going to be awesome. You already are awesome, but I'm so excited about the future for our schools because we have such dedicated, amazing teachers and leaders like you guys. So thank you for making my job easy. You've been awesome. Okay, guys, well, I'm going to give you 6 minutes of your life back tonight. So, just get everything turned in and you'll be good to go. You guys have a great rest of the week. Bye.